Uh, so I have done this presentation, Building Highly Effective Teams, quite a bit, but I've never done it in this type of venue. So we'll see how that shakes out. Again, my name is Marty Shea. I am the Los Angeles instructor delivering the SBA Emerging Leaders Program. This is the 7th year. We deliver two cohorts in Los Angeles, so we're busy April through October, and it's just so much fun to do. I will, as far as the presentation goes and the discussion, if it's okay with you guys, I would just like to cover the 4 key points that we're going to discuss in terms of building these highly effective teams. And as we cover each one, then we'll stop and open it up for questions or discussion to actually get some clarity on whatever point that we made at that point. Whether we are able to cover all 4, I'm not sure in the time frame. But if you miss 2 or 3, all you have to do is come out to Virginia in September and register for the summit, and then you get to hang out and see the whole presentation then. So, good to hear you guys. A little background on myself. Besides doing the LA instructor, I am a restaurant industry veteran of 25, 30 years. Founded a company in 1987 in San Francisco with basically no money. Not a whole lot of smarts, but a lot of determination and grit, I suppose. It started off with 1 location and built the business to 67 locations up and down the West Coast, Seattle, Chicago. We are currently based in San Francisco. Sold the company in 2013, so I get to spend all my time doing this, which is the most fun anybody could ever have. As a CEO and a founder of the company, I will tell you this: I did some good things when the company. I did some insanely stupid things, but one of the things I were really good at was identifying talent and building teams and building infrastructure within the organization. I was blessed with that, and also an ability not to be afraid to make mistakes. So I'd like to start off to tell you how we came into this presentation and how I came up with the topic. And it simply was this. I think probably about 3 years into the company, I was walking around our locations in San Francisco. At the time, we had 8. And I'm walking around, and which I tended to do at least once a week, and observe the operations. And I found myself one day watching all the stores, all the restaurants, just working in symphony, amazingly well. It was one of those things, I'm sure you can all do it when you sit back and watch your organization run. You're going, whoa, how did this happen? This is amazing. But it struck me as I was looking at it that I didn't know why. I wasn't sure why it was working as well it was working. And then it occurred to me, if this broke, would I know how to fix it? So that was, it made me realize that I had defaulted to personalities to run the business and not necessarily systems. And behind all great personalities and personnel that you all have in your organizations, behind them are great systems. So it prompted me, and that was the impetus to developing a system of bringing in people in the organization, identifying culture, identifying good fits to the culture, and then positioning them so they could do the best thing they could do to help scale the company. So that said, there's 4 key components to building what I called a high-performance team. And the first one is simply this: to select performance-oriented people and position them for maximum impact. The second component of building a high-performance team is to, and this is key, is to clarify the what is it you do as an organization, and the why. Why do you do what you do? What gets you out of bed in the morning? The third component of building a high-performance team is to organize to the whys, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means, and that's organizing the majority of your time and resources should be allocated to what you do. And then last but not least, as a CEO, founder, or chief principal in your company, you need to orchestrate and evaluate everything and each and everything on a daily basis. So let's let's talk about this briefly here. So if you look at your company, number one, why does it work so well? If it broke, how do I fix it? If I don't know why it's working so well, I won't know how to fix it. And here's a key that maybe you guys can all relate to. As you run your organizations and you have issues, whether it's personnel issues or operational issues or technical issues, what do we do as CEOs or organizations? We bring the team together, the brilliant minds that we have, and we do a downright autopsy on every problem that we had to figure out why it happened, what are we going to do about it, and how we're going to fix it. Now, the opposite of that is when we're successful in an organization, we tend to just say, well, isn't that great? We don't do the same autopsy. We don't look and say, why does something work? And I know in my organization, I always ask the question, when a store or a restaurant performed very well, they knew they were going to get the question, how come? What is it you're doing that makes this organization run at this level? And to force them to understand that why. What is it we're doing and why are we doing it so well? So when we talk about building teams, and this is relevant to teams, especially who have over 30 employees and have multiple divisions, we're talking about building teams, and teams are predisposed to doing. They're predisposed to execution. And when I say select performance-oriented people and position them for maximum impact, some people get thrown off guard when I make the simple comment that when you're recruiting people, recruit doers and not thinkers, not just thinkers. And people would think, well, is it because you don't want smart people on your organization? Absolutely not. You have to surround yourself with smart people. But you want to bring people into your teams that are predisposed to doing. And I will say this, that it's much easier to educate a doer than it is to activate a thinker. And if you need thinkers, here's a key, rent one. Hire a doer, rent a thinker. So why do we want to recruit doers and not just thinkers? And frankly, why do we do that? And part of that comes from profiling, interviewing techniques, onboarding processes. How do we find these people that are predisposed to doing and not just thinking? I'll throw this back to you guys as a group. Do you guys agree with that statement, number one? And second of all, as you go about screening and bringing people into your organization, what's your methodology? What type of people are you looking for, and how effective are you at bringing in people who are doers and not just thinkers? I'll open that up to discussion real quick.
And just remember to unmute yourself before you speak.
I can say something about that. I don't know. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yes, sure can.
I've done various different things. I've owned this company now for 14 years, and we've done various different profiling, and I think there's definitely challenges to that. I think I've found it to be difficult sometimes in certain geographies because I think there's certain characteristics of work ethic in different areas of the country. But also, I do feel that the personality profiling only does one piece of it. And I think there's also some innate characteristics and some that are not. And it's just trained.
I would agree with Nancy. I think the profile can give you an indication of the personality and the characteristics that employ, but it's not going to be a solve all.
I think it's hard to determine motivation and what motivates them, and that's one of the challenges. But I understand the difference between the doers and thinkers. But how do you understand what motivates every individual?
That's a great question. Does anybody have a response to that or an answer for Nancy on that one?
I have a comment to make on that. I think that number one, there's Marty, you may know this answer, but I know there's a certain series of things that motivate people, whether they're, it's almost like the love languages, whether it's a service or words of appreciation or gifts or things like that. I think that fair question to ask people during the interview process. One of my questions is how do you get through the layers in the interview process? Because in my experience of interviewing, you know, people show a side of them that you have to get beyond. And I know there's certain techniques you can do that, and it's great if you have different people interviewing, but when you only have one person, I think that you're really limited. And I would love to see how you get beyond that sort of you know, overcoat that everybody wears into an interview, even 1, 2, and 3 interviews.
Well, Laura, that's a challenge, and if you guys don't mind, I'll give you a little insight on how I did it over the years. And I would have to say I probably interviewed, oh God, I can't even tell you how many people I've interviewed over the years, from hourly to senior management executive types to investors. But I think the first step in the whole process, again, Nancy was right on. The profile will give you an indication of, is this person a relatively, on the surface, a good fit for the task that or the position that you're hiring for. But the first step, and Laura, on the interview process is if the purpose is to find out as much as you can possibly find about this individual in an interview process, you want them to take that overcoat off. And the first step to do that is make them as absolute comfortable with you in their environment as possible in the interview. I know over the years I would interview people, and I would always catch people off guard because my initial 5 or 10 minutes of it had absolutely nothing to do with why they were there. They were random questions about how their weekend was spent, what are some of their hobbies, what did they think about the Laker game last night. Anything I could do to put them at ease, let them sit back in their chair and become comfortable with me and establish some commonality. And I did that for no other reason but if I knew I could make them comfortable, the overcoat was going to come off. I was going to hear and see and observe things, the real them. As you know, as you go into an interview, you're a little bit stiff, you're somewhat scripted. Your intent is to give them your interviewer the answers they want to hear. Catch them off guard, make them comfortable, number one. Second of all, one of the best interview questions I was taught, and this is about as simple as you can get. If you're looking to recruit doers into your organization and not just thinkers, a great interview question is simply this. So Laura, tell me, what have you done? And sit back and listen. Don't interrupt. Don't try to answer the question for Laura. Listen to what her response is. Now, if she stumbles with that response,
Marty, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I didn't hear what you said. I missed the whole question. It seemed to go mute during that time. Could you repeat the question that you would ask them?
The question I ask is simply this: what have you done? I know it sounds basic and very simple, but if you ask a prospective applicant, regardless of the position, and they stumble with that question or they're not able to answer articulately or at all, then they're probably not predisposed to doing. And if you're looking to recruit people who can execute and get things done and have forward energy, they're probably, if they're struggle with that question, they're probably not going to be a good candidate for that slot. The other concept of interviews, and we could spend a whole hour on interviewing, is a CEO, we tend to be poor interviewers for the simple reason that we're passionate about who we are, what we do, and boy, we want to tell people. We want to tell people who we are and what we do. And therefore, when we interview applicants, guess what? We spend 75% of the time trying to sell our company and 25% of the time trying to figure out who this person is, when it should be the total opposite. So as interviews, we need to learn to shut up, ask the question, shut up, and listen. And as I've said over the years, that there's a quote I've always had in my office says, leaders who refuse to listen will eventually be surrounded by people who have nothing important to say. There's truth to that, and I've experienced it firsthand. So an interview should listen, ask questions, don't answer them for them, be patient. Don't be afraid to cut the interview short if you know this person is not a good fit for the organization. I've had 5-minute interviews and I've had 2-hour interviews. So what have you done? Commonality, get the applicant comfortable with you. That can supplement the profiling that Nancy had brought up to determine whether or not this person, again, we're talking about teams, are they predisposed to execution and doing? Because that's what teams do. If teams do not do, they're not moving forward, they're moving sideways.
And Marty, I imagine that question too, the what have you done question, it being so general, it might even get back to Nancy's question about motivation. Being so broad, you know, what's most important to them, what they value most, and what they prioritize will probably be one of the first things that comes to mind.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, another great question is, what's the most important thing about your next job? What is it that is most important for you to fill into your next position? Find out, what are they looking for? So another great question is, what would you do if you didn't need money? I mean, these are awesome questions that you'll get a feeling of a person's personality, their desires, their characteristics, their integrity, their honesty. Again, that's assuming you've made them feel comfortable when they walk in the door. How do they define success is another great question. Does it, and this, I will say, guys, too, though, these are great questions, but there's some assumptions here before you ask them. And number one, as a CEO, do you have a clear vision for your company? Do you know where you want to go with the organization? Because if someone doesn't fit that vision, these questions could become a real quick deselection process for you. The second thing is, the vision is where we're going. The mission is how we're going to get there. The core values of your organization, do you know what they are? Have you defined those values? And you define them as a CEO. Don't let your employees define them, because, well, I guess I should say, if you don't define them, your employees will define them for you, and you may not like that definition. So you have to be clear on the vision, mission, and core values. You should also have job descriptions, so you know if this person may fit into that job description. And to some extent, I think there's some importance, especially with, well, actually, it doesn't matter whether you have 3 employees or 30. Do you have an organizational chart? Does it show you who does what? And do you have one for what it looks like? I know in our Emerging Leaders program here in Los Angeles, we go through an exercise of putting an org chart together, not for what it looks like now, but what it's going to look like in 3 years. And it starts that long-term visionary thinking versus, what do I have to do today? Any other thoughts or comments on the selecting people for performance-oriented people and positioning them for maximum impact? Anybody else have any thoughts or comments on that? Okay. So the second component of that is just that, position individuals for maximum impact. Put people where they could do the best work, where they're gifted, where their skill set is, where their desires are. Don't try to put a square peg into a round hole. They'll fail. Positioning people for maximum impact. How do you do that? Does anybody say, look, I know how to find the right people and put them in the right position in my organization? Anybody who had success doing that, or have any thoughts on how they might go about it? Okay. Well, I guess I do. So I'll just keep going. But if I talk too much, you guys tell me to shut up and start start adding your own opinions on there. So here's a thought on putting people in a position for their greatest contribution to the company. First, 2 things. Number one, if you do have an org chart, when you're bringing people into the organization, that organizational chart that you have may not be your friend. And what do I mean by that? We tend to say, look, we're going to move somebody up a notch in the org chart because they've been with us for 5 years, and by gosh, that position's open now, so we're going to move them up. But the reality is they may not be gifted in that area, they may not be skilled in that area, and frankly, they may not even want to move into that area. But as leaders, we tend to put what we believe are the right people in the right position until they prove us wrong. So one of the other, this goes back again to the interviewing process. I'd like to have applicants, or I should say I did, if I found somebody, especially in a higher level position, I'd ask them, I want you to submit to me your ideal job description. Has nothing to do with what this position is, but I want to know, what is it if you could make your own job description right now, what would it look like? And I'd ask them to submit that. Now, if they didn't submit it, they basically deselected themselves, or came close to anyway. But if they did, it gave me an idea of where their passions lie, where are they gifted at, and what is it, and would they be happy in the organization at this position? So that's one component of putting people in where they can make the greatest contribution. The other side of that is people, that your employees, once you bring them in, and I'll make a sports analogy of this if you guys don't mind. If you take a basketball team or a football team or a professional sports franchise, everybody understands their role. For instance, if there's a football team, the quarterback knows exactly what their role is. The running back knows what their role is. The linemen know specifically what their role is. They're not to pass the ball. They're not going to run the ball. They're going to block. Everyone clearly understands their role, and they collaborate as a team to become successful. Which means, and the same premise applies to our organizations. If we have team members, do they understand their roles and how they impact others? If Laura Lee has a role as in her organization with Interrise, does she understand clearly what the alumni network, how that connects to the broader vision of Interrise and the mission? I know she does. I'm sure she does. It's not. I'm not operating in a vacuum. I know what I do, how that impacts Interrise as a whole. So you want your employees to understand, and even at the lowest level, what is it you do, and how does it impact the way the way that others do their jobs? You have to clarify this with your team to build a team that's synergetic. And what I'll say this comment, and what I've witnessed believe me, you guys, it took me years to even come close to figuring this out. And I was one of those guys who was moving forward, and I turned around and everybody else was moving sideways. And I couldn't figure out why. And a lot of it became because they didn't understand how their role contributed to the success of the company. So on that side, teams need to collaborate. They need to all be moving in the same direction. Why is my job important? How does it impact others? And if they understand that, they will move forward and not sideways. If you're going to recruit doers, what have you done? If you can't answer that question, you're probably not an action-oriented person. Sometimes the org chart's not going to be your friend. You may have to bring in, we talk about hiring for talent and emerging leaders. It's a great concept. We tend to look at experience. I know in some industries like Curtis Martin in construction, the experience is critical. Talent may be nice to have, but in other organizations, we're looking for character, skill, and talent and ability over experience in many instances. So that basically, to start off the high performance building process, we have to hire people and performance oriented people and position them for maximum impact. Questions, comments, disagreements, clapping.
Don't be shy.
Okay. All right. All right. So let's move on. How much? I don't have my clock. Laura, how are we on time right now?
We're good. Got about 25 minutes.
Okay, good. So let's move on to the second component of building a high performance team, which is clarifying the what and the why. And as CEOs and leaders, we tend to kind of poo-poo this stuff. That's soft skill stuff. Who cares? I mean, we just got to work. We got to do things. We got to get things done. Who cares about clarifying what we do and why we do it? Except for nonprofits. Nonprofits do very well in this area. They're excellent at clarifying why we do what we do and what we do. if you put it's break it down simply, guys. Clarifying what you do and why you do it is simply this: the what you do is your mission. What is it we do, and your why is the inspiration. If there's clarity around those, and your team gets that, they get what is it we do, and they also get why we do it. You're going to have synergy. You're going to have teams that are performing at a high level of performance, and also you're going to find that as you recruit people, if they don't buy into the what and the why, they're not a good candidate for your organization. It's a built-in deselection process, as I said before. So determine the what and why are important. So how do we do that? How do you deploy? Let me just a quick analogy. I'm going back a few years, but I always found this to be fascinating. Simon Sinek, I think you guys have all watched that video that he does of how leaders inspire action. And he always said, and I love this comment, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So wrap your arms around your brain around that one again. People, your clients aren't buying what you do, they're buying why you do it for the most part. And that makes sense because 75% of all sales are based on what? Emotion, not logic. Well, there's a story with Steve Jobs back in the 80s when he recruited John Scully, who was the head of Pepsi-Cola at the time. And Scully was a brilliant marketing mind, and he was a brilliant CEO, and Pepsi was in its heyday, and Jobs was going about changing the world, which he did. And he recruited Scully for the position, and he asked Scully the simple question. He said, "Are you going to sell sugared water the rest of your life, or you want to come with me and change the world?" And Scully essentially bought the why from Jobs, not the what. He was selling sugared water, that was the why. But he bought the why from Jobs and went on for 10 years to move Apple to closer and closer to the company they inevitably became. So clarifying that what is important. Clarity on the what is influence, and leadership itself is influence defines leadership. So clarity around the what and the why can also lay the groundwork for change. How many of you guys, as you work in your organization, when you say you're going to change the way we do something, everybody runs for cover or hides under the table? Change is a dirty word. Nobody wants to hear change in an organization. It scares the life out of people. We've been doing this for so long the same way. Why do we have to change? Well, if you don't know why and what, you don't know what you're doing and why you do it, change is going to be difficult. You might as well not even attempt it. But if people understand the what is it we do and why do we do it, that lays the groundwork for change. It's going to be easier for you to pivot and change in your organization.
Yeah. Marty, do you, or maybe anybody else on the call, have thoughts or suggestions about how to communicate that why? I'm thinking about an Atlanta alum who spoke at our instructor training in March, and how he was kind of noticing how when he was the best salesperson there because he was so passionate about what he did. But one of his big challenges was then translating that passion, translating that why to his team so that they could achieve the same results. So do you have anybody really thoughts or strategies about how to kind of bring the whole team on board with that what and why once you've established it for yourself?
Curtis, talk to me, Curtis. You must have some ideas on how that. I know you have a brilliantly run organization. How do you get people rallied around what you do?
Oh, yes. Let me unmute you. I just unmuted you, Curtis. I don't know if we can hear you now. Yeah, maybe still trouble there with the mic. We've got a chat line open though. How about somebody else? Maybe somebody with a bigger.
So this is
yeah, go ahead.
You know, one thing that I say is why we do what we do is in our mission statement. But I think what really motivates people to be loyal to the company and actually do what they were hired to do is really the vision that I lay out. I talk about that from the very beginning, is this is where we are today, but this is where we will be in 3 years, 5 years, and this is how you can progress within the organization.
Donna, that's brilliant. The vision is the inspiration. That is what is going to bring people to buy into what you do and want to go forward with you on that journey to wherever it is you design that you're going to be in 3 or 4 years. Laura, Alita, a little bit on your question too. And actually, I'm plugging my other workshop a little bit on leading on purpose, but I won't go into that. But I think, Donna, if you have a clear vision of where your organization is going, and this is not to be taken lightly. People want to know, why am I working for this company, and what is it we're doing, and where are we going, and why should I stay with you and perform at a high level? Well, the simple thing is, if you have a vision, state it simply. Don't get all convoluted with a 10-page dissertation on why your company is going to be someplace in 5 years. A simply stated, one-sentence vision of this is who we will be in a predetermined amount of time. Why do we want it simple? Because it becomes memorable, and it becomes transferable, and it becomes what I call portable. People carry around that vision, as Adonna's employees are now. I carry that with me wherever I go. I know where I'm going. It's a simply stated vision. Second thing is, you got to repeat it. It's just not hanging on the wall as wallpaper. It has to be. It really has to be the GPS of your organization. You got to repeat it at recruiting events. You got to repeat it at network events. You got to repeat it at team meetings. You got to talk about this vision incessantly with people. The third component is you have to reward it, and really the other word is celebrate it. Every time a team member does something or executes or does something that takes your company closer to that vision, you got to celebrate it. You got to acknowledge it. You got to point it out. And however your culture allows you to do that, it has to be done. Because for those who have kids and pets, we all know what gets rewarded gets repeated, right? So it's a common. If somebody takes you closer to your vision, the organization, my gosh, acknowledge that because they'll like that acknowledgement, and guess what? They'll do it again. So I think that's it, Laura Lee, to touch on your question a little bit is how do you get people to buy in? How do you get people to be inspired to the why? Simple statement, repeat it, and celebrate it when it happens. Questions, comments? I feel like I'm talking way too much for a round table. Okay. Let's move on since we have a few more minutes, right, Laura? Do we have about 15 minutes?
Yeah, we do. We're doing good on time.
Okay. Let's move on to the third component. We talked about selecting performance-oriented people and positioning them for the maximum impact. Find their strengths, find their gifts. How you can do that, there's a lot of different profiles that can be used. We can talk about those offline or at the summit. We can also, figure out what, the interview process and how that kind of plays into the selection process. The second part is be clear as a leader of your organization. What is it you do and why do you do it? The third topic we'll talk about is organize whatever you do, organize everything to the what. Organize everything to what. And what I mean by that is create within your organization, the majority of the time and the resources, and the resources can be interpreted as money. The majority of your time and resources are allocated to what you do, to the mission. What is it we do? What is it we sell? What is it we provide? What is it we do better than everybody else? Your resources and time should be allocated to the why. Don't bring people to your organization and force them or ask them to work alongside of tasks or goals or strategies that have no correlation to your vision, mission, and values. Does that make sense? When we do strategic growth plans in the organization, I know I had 37 growth plans to go through this year between two cohorts. My first step is to look at what is the 3-year vision of that organization? And then I go right down to the goals and I ask myself and I ask the participant, are those goals related and aligned in any way, shape, or form to what your vision is? Because if the answer to that question is no, then why are you putting any time and resources into executing?
I have a follow-up question. Can you give me an example of something that wouldn't be related to the mission of an organization?
Let me think. Let me go back. Let me go back to my. That's a great question. You catch it. My coaching. I do executive coaching on a part-time basis. If I'm going to, my mission for my clients is to drive profitability for their business and margin for their lives. And when I say margin, that means allow that individual to have more of a work-life balance, if you will. So if I'm coaching someone and we're putting strategies and goals together within that organization, and I myself or as a client-coach relationship, we discover that some of the initiatives or some of the plans or strategies, if we look back and say, is this going to drive profitability for the business? Not really. Is this going to provide margin for my life and more time and more time with my family or more time to pursue some of the passions I have outside of the business? No, not really. Then I would ask, and I'm not sure who asked the question, so I don't want to, but then I would ask myself, is this a strategy or goal that we want to allocate our time and our resources to? Conversely, if the answer to both those that question was yes on both occasions, yes, it is aligned with the vision. Yes, it is going to drive profitability. Yes, it is going to help my work-life balance. Then we want to allocate time and resources. Did that make sense at all? I think it did. I hope it did.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good. But I have to stress, you've got to be clear before you make that determination on what are you doing, what is it we do, and why do we do it, and where are we going. Think of it this way: the vision is the destination. The vision is how you're going to get there. The values you have as an organization are what you as an organization will stand for. Ethically, integrity, and honesty, whatever those things are, what will you stand for as an organization underneath to the vision? So create an organization where you're...
Could you repeat that again? You just said the vision is the destination, and then could you repeat the next one?
Yeah, if you look at your company and you say the vision, okay, we've been in business for 14 years, 10 years, 5 years. We have this vision, clear vision of what we're going to look like and where we're going to be in 5 years. Let's just pick 5. It could be 10, but let's say 5 years. We know where we're going to be. So there's a destination we're headed towards. So vision becomes the destination. The mission is how we're going to get there. And again, I'll allude back to my coaching practice: drive profitability for the business and margin for the life. And for our life. That's how we're going to get to the destination. That's the mission. The core values are simply, what is it we stand for? What do we value? And those, you as leaders should form those, because they're your identity. And the common ones are, integrity, honesty, success, whatever it is that you believe to be true. But then define what it means to you. Because you could, you guys all know this, if you throw out integrity as one of your core values in the organization, and you had 30 employees and you asked 30 people what integrity meant to them, you'd get 30 different definitions. You want them to understand your definition, the company's definition. If they don't buy into that, they're probably not a good fit for the organization. If they do, you've now captured a little bit of the why. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So the fourth component is, well, let me just just summarize number 3. When we organize to the what, when your time, the time that you have in your organization and the resources, whether resources can be money, it can be equipment, it can be technology, whatever tools that you need to move your company forward, when you organize your time and resources and they're allocated to what you do, you're going to get forward, what I always call forward energy. You're going to create momentum and movement forward, and people and your team are not going to be going sideways. And nothing more frustrating when you're going forward and everybody else is going sideways. And then number 4, the last component, we'll touch briefly on that. And I got this one from a book probably you're all familiar with, the E-Myth book from Michael Gerber. I always was fascinated by it. He always said, orchestrate and evaluate everything. And when I say orchestrate, it's simply this. It communicate with clarity to your team. This is how we do it here until further notified. This is how we do it here until further notified. Systems and processes have to be created, and how we do this. People manage systems and processes. Great companies have great systems and process. They hire great people to manage those systems and process. But those are subject to change when they get outdated. But they're not changed until they're evaluated. And that's where it means you have to orchestrate everything. This is how we do it. And if we're going to change something, it's upon evaluation, not because we just feel like changing something today. We've evaluated and it doesn't make sense, it doesn't work, it doesn't move us in the right direction. So when you orchestrate everything, it brings consistency and predictability to your systems and processes. And frankly, people feel more comfortable in a situation where they know that there's ground rule. This is how we operate. This is how I do my job. This is how I execute. I don't have to worry about stepping out of bounds because the process and the system is clear to me. On terms of evaluation, and we talked about this at the top, evaluate success as easily as you evaluate problems. And our tendency, again, is to evaluate when something is not working right. We'll hold a 10-hour Saturday afternoon meeting to figure out why. But when something is working right, we just kind of go pee and go on our happy way without trying to figure out why it's working right. So evaluate everything. And then I'll close this side in something that this goes back to your org chart, I suppose, not being your friend. If you're not clear on how an area of your company is operating, I called it do an end run on your org chart. You don't have to go back to the people who report to you, your key people who may not have the answers. Go directly to those people, those team members that are living and breathing what you're asking them to do every day. Go right directly to them, bring them into the discussion, work to solve problems, get their feedback, incorporate them into the team, make them feel like I got a role here and my voice is heard. Remember, leaders who refuse to listen will be surrounded by people who have nothing important to say. Incorporate all team members into the discussion. And if that means you have to, for those who have larger companies who might have a vice president of operations or a VP of marketing, doesn't mean you have to go to them. Go down to the people that are actually executing and find out why it's working or why it's not working. So those are the 4. We kind of touched on each one. Then you get into a whole lot of detail, but if you come to the summit, we'll get into more. Is there a summit happening in September? I don't know.
There is a summit happening in September. I'm sure you've all seen the emails with my smiling face at the bottom, but September 10th through 12th. And yeah, Marty is presenting this as a session. as well as another one called Leading on Purpose, which he's done in a webinar format. And he also did at our 2015 summit, and it was, I mean, I'm not, just bragging because you're here, Marty, but it really was the best received session at the event. People really loved it. So
that's a good.
Yeah. So I encourage you all to come check it out. Other instructors like Marty will be there presenting sessions very similar, and they'll be small, so you'll have an opportunity to really engage and interact and talk specifically about your business.